Hello and welcome to the Rooted Business Podcast. Today's episode, I am just so thrilled I get to share this with you because it is honestly one of my favorite episodes that I've ever recorded. And I'm so glad that I got to have this conversation with my dear friend Lockie Phillips, and I now get to share it with you. So, the theme of winter this year is all about burnout. And in episode 125, which is the episode right before this one, I recorded a separate conversation about burnout with my friends Misa Bacon and Candace Elliott. And in that one, I think that we get into the history of understanding why we culturally have been conditioned to, been validated to basically work ourselves to a point where it is unsustainable. And we talk about how that is common, but just because it's common doesn't mean that it's normal. So this is kind of a sister episode to that one. And in this one, my friend Lockie, who is a horse trainer, he's an equestrian coach, and he's also a horse dad. We talk about burnout and the sneakiness of burnout that comes when we are living an inauthentic life. And as two humans, both he and I, we are recovering from and developing awareness. I think that this is going to be sort of a constant in my lifetime anyway. We're developing awareness around burnout. And so we dive into the raw nuances of burnout and its correlation to our drive to belong, and why it is that we do so much striving. And for us, it comes from both of our backgrounds are from immigrants. He's an immigrant and I come from immigrant parents, and why that has been a really big motor in our lives to perform, to constantly be doing, to always be like moving. So we share our personal struggles with recurrent burnout. We shed light on the essence of working with our seasons, working with our cycles and our bodies. I like thinking that like we bridge spirituality and practicality in this conversation. And we really talk about this delicate balance that we have about accountability and space in both our personal lives and in our businesses. Towards the end, we bring a lot of the conversation to empowering clients to become their own problem solvers, and what happens when we are able to do that as service providers is we're able to eliminate a lot of the challenges that we have around boundaries and burnout. And Lucky has such a discerning presence. Because of that, I feel like we were able to navigate through a lot of these complexities and offer insights on dealing with burnout in a healthier and more sustainable way. So I'm really thrilled to share this conversation with you so that you too can discover how to better navigate burnout and work in a more balanced way. So let's tune in. Let's explore this path together. Before we do that, I want to share a little bit about Lucky. Lucky is a internationally sought after horse trainer, and he focuses on the emotional well-being of horses through his training method that he calls emotional horsemanship. He is a retired professional dancer, an Australian immigrant living in Spain, and Lucky delivers a lot of his services online. That is for deeply caring horse owners all around the world, and he travels internationally for clinics annually. He lives quietly on a small farm in rural Galicia, and Lucky is exploring entrepreneurship that seeks to change the way that service providers are accessed by clients in a way that creates sustainable and responsible business offerings now and in the future. So if you are listening to this at the release of this recording, he has a yearly holiday sale in which you can sign up for both his online trainings, his courses, his coaching packages at a discounted rate. And you can find all of that on his website, which is emotionalhorsemanship.com. I personally have signed up for a pack of coaching with him that I'm going to use this upcoming year so that I can be working through some of the trust issues that I'm having with my own personal horses. And I've taken a couple of his courses online. They are very well thought out. You know, as a teacher myself, I love being taught by other teachers who really know how to teach. And to me, that is something that Lockie has down. Is there's a reason why he puts things in the order that he puts things in. There's such a design to his courses that it makes learning a lot more digestible, a lot more fun. And so if you are a horse person, I highly recommend checking out his website. Again, the holiday sale is happening now until the end of the year. You can also check out a lot of the content that he puts out on the web, which is both on Patreon, Instagram, YouTube. All those links are down below. And I'm really excited to share this conversation with Lucky with you. If you liked this conversation, I also wanted to point you to a previous conversation that I had with him. That was episode 104, and that one is titled Spiritual Entrepreneurship, the Importance of Client Agency and Holding Healthy Boundaries. And I honestly feel like this conversation is a sister conversation to 125, which I just released about burnout. But this conversation is also just a continuation of that conversation that I had with him back in May of 2023. So go ahead and check out all those resources. And I'm really, really excited to share Lucky with you. Hello, wonderful friends. I am here with a repeat guest. This is my dear friend Lucky, and this is something that I do off camera, but oftentimes when I feel like I've had like a really juicy conversation with one of my guests, I say, hey, if you ever have anything that's on your heart and you want to just jam about it, shoot me a message and we'll get you back on the show and we'll play. And Lucky, you are literally in the 2 years that I've been doing this. You're like the only person who's actually taken me up on that.
I don't believe you. I don't believe you. That can't be possible.
Yeah, so I've had repeat guests just because like I have friends and, you know,
Right.
like we'll be in conversation, I'll be like, "Oh, this should be a podcast episode." But I've never had somebody who was like, I
Let's
really
play.
want to like jam out about this thing. And so I'm actually going to like give you a little bit of the reins and like what is it that you want to like play with and where are we taking this conversation, Lucky?
So, you invited me on that first podcast and it was a really interesting conversation for me. And oh, fuck it. I'm just going to say it. Not all podcast conversations are interesting. Sometimes I find myself just repeating myself. It's true. Like, I'm
It's true.
happy to be there because when you're being introduced to new communities, you start at the base level. When I say not interesting, it means maybe just not interesting for me, but it could be interesting for other people. So, anyway, I've already pissed off everyone. But um, your our conversation was interesting for me because you asked me questions about behind the scenes of a business. And I know that you're spiritually minded, but you're also a horse girl and you kind of blend the two in this really fluid way. And I've been watching your social media since we were on the conversation. And then I saw you steer really beautiful conversations towards burnout. And I've been flip-flopping from burnout to burnout since I was 15. And apparently it's a repeatable pattern. And it's a weed with deep roots. And I'm interested in genuinely uprooting it. And you had a conversation, I can't remember who it was with, but you were discussing work with a seasonal analogy. You were saying there's a winter, a spring, a summer, and a fall to your work output. And that gave me permission that it's okay sometimes to be in extreme output mode, you know? Prolific is a word one of my friends used to describe the amount of content I have put out on my own despite huge obstacles. Prolific, they said. And I went, really? Because I feel like I've been struggling to keep up with how much I wanted to put out.
Mm.
And I get in these modes where I'm like pumping all this stuff out. And then there are times when I want to sit back and I don't give anything. And you had this really beautiful conversation on burnout. And I'd had 3 or 4 conversations of burnout
Mm.
preceding me listening to your podcast. And I was like, I need to continue this conversation and I need to
Yeah.
continue it with you because you have a perspective on business that I've not quite come across yet. You
Mm.
blend spiritual with the pragmatic, accountability with holding space, and it's a very tricky balance. And I believe you managed to do that.
Mm.
So that's what I'd like to discuss today. But if we sort of spring out into a wider ranging conversation, I'm here for it too.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel so seen in this moment, Lucky.
Yeah. Oh, good.
Yeah, I think that the place that I want to sort of start this conversation is like I am a recovering burnout
Worko-
artist as well. I
workaholic.
know
Mhm.
yeah, exactly. And it has I think part of the process of really understanding that is really getting to the depths of where that has actually served you.
Mm.
Um, because the way that I look at like what people call like shadow work is I don't want to identify that part and then just be like, let's exorcise that demon. You know,
Mm.
it's really about okay, so like this part of me exists. There's a reason it exists. There's likely a protective part of that story. And how can we integrate and digest that part of me in such a way that it feels safe to stop doing the pattern to survive? And so
Wow.
I'm curious, how has burnout served you? Or overworking, I
Inte-
guess.
integration
Mm.
instead of excision. Seeing burnout as an undigested meal rather than a cancer or a fault or a sickness.
Mm.
That's already changed my mindset. It gives workaholics permission to not feel shame
Mm.
over having a work addiction. So one, I
Mhm.
think it's an addiction. Two, raised by self-employed parents, and in my extended family, all self-employed.
Mhm.
My father is an Australian expert on small businesses and self-employed
Mhm.
people. My mum was an entrepreneur. She retired early. And it's in my blood and it's in my DNA, it's in my bones to be self employed and to work really, really hard. So it served me because it honored family roots. And to not work yourself to the bone on some level feels like a betrayal of family.
Mm.
And so that's been something to unpack with a qualified mental health practitioner.
Mhm.
Which, as soon as you get your LLC or SL or whatever, or autonomo in Spain, it should come with an accountant and a therapist. Those two things should come together in your start package when you're a small business owner, because it's a whole thing, right? So it served me because being an emigrant, living on the other side of the world, separated from family, working really, really hard, honored my family ties when every other tie was gone.
Mm.
That's one. Number two, there was a little thing called COVID-19 that happened. You know, we all kind of blacked out for 3 years, and here we are. And I mean, I was pretty poor and struggling all of my 20s with my dance career beforehand, surviving on below the international minimum wage for someone born into Western civilization.
Mhm.
And then moving to another country again, and then building a business from scratch and living off nothing each month. And then COVID hit and it all disappeared. And I fell into a bureaucratic gray area where I didn't qualify for any government assistance from my birth country in Australia because I hadn't lived there for over 10 years
Mm-hmm.
or worked there. I didn't qualify for any government assistance during COVID from the Spanish government because I hadn't been 6 months in the country yet. And I didn't qualify for any government assistance from where I had just left Poland because I had just closed my company in Poland. So I found myself facing COVID with about €2.50 in my bank account and 2 horses and 3 dogs and 3 cats and a partner who was also going through it professionally. That shook me to my core.
Absolutely.
And I'm still vibrating to this day. And it's literally within the last 3 to 4 months when I moved into my farm, because I'm doing good now. As you can see, I've had a glow up. I've got a soundproofed office and a farmhouse and 4 horses now, and I'm doing well. But it's only in the last 4 months I've been able to turn around and take a breath and go, okay, survival strategy, done, tick. I know how to do that. I know how to survive an unprecedented event and scrabble my way out of a black hole.
Yeah.
Overwork is a survival mechanism.
As you were talking, particularly as you're talking about your ties to family lineage, the word epigenetics came to mind.
This is why I wanted to talk to you, because you know this stuff. Generational trauma.
Yeah. And it was just the like this. I know that you're not going to be offended if I like call you out a little bit here,
No,
but
always call me
like
out. That's why I'm here.
there's like a rigidity to like this is my DNA, this is in my bones, this is like who
Mm-hmm,
I am,
mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm,
And I think that a lot of times people fall to that when they're talking about like physical ailments,
mm-hmm.
right? Like, oh, diabetes runs in my family, and so therefore I'm fated to also have diabetes.
Right?
Um, and really, what we're finding is yes, there may be a propensity to diabetes because of particular genetics, but what you do in life matters.
Mm,
The different decisions that you make in your life, the way you integrate, the way, like, if we're just using diabetes as an example, like the way you move, the way you eat, the, ways in which you sort of like view health matters. And so ultimately that can lead into a yes, you have diabetes, or no, you don't have diabetes.
mm,
And I feel like there's um, an energetic emotional component to that as well, like that we don't always speak about. I too grew up in a family. My parents immigrated from Korea. My dad literally came to the United States and then immediately had all of his money stolen at the Chicago O'Hare airport. And so
oh
he
my
started
word.
from nothing. And,
Mm,
I grew up with a dad who worked. I, I, I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say that he worked like 70 to 90 hours a week, like
mm-hmm,
through most of my childhood. And it's how we
mm-hmm,
survived. It's like our immigrant survival story. And so I hear that in yours as well, of like, this is how my family learned to survive. And I thought that was the only choice, right? As
mm,
well. This is how
mm,
we belong in our families.
mm,
And this is how we find a sense of like camaraderie, and almost like, I remember when I first started my business, this was back when I was an acupuncturist, and I would talk about how tired I was
mm-hmm. Like a
of
badge of
like,
honor.
yeah, exactly. My parents
Yep.
would be like, "Oh my gosh, like we know how hard you're working." And it's because that was something that was relatable to them.
Mm-hmm,
And so I've noticed that as I have integrated some of those overworking wounds, there is less of that kind of interaction with my parents because I'm very rarely tired now.
mm-hmm,
And I love the life that I've built. And so it's like we've had to find a different language around relating that was really, really difficult to forge at first.
Yes, I can imagine. You're further ahead on this journey than I am because obviously your business is now about businesses and about integrated. That's what you wake up to do each day. My business isn't about that. This is like a side hustle for me. Dealing with myself has become a side hustle in my own life, and
Mm.
realizing that was a profound realization this summer, and it was like, "Oh, that's got to stop right
Mhm.
away." What did I do? I had a very honest conversation with my schedule, and I said, "No, no, no. What is actually realistic, doesn't overbook me, doesn't overextend me, honors my energetic levels, builds in rest time between client sessions,
Mhm.
maximizes my reach so that I'm still reaching people who want access to you." And it involved basically reducing my availability by approximately 40%.
Mm. I love this for you.
And I don't regret it. I'm still, funnily enough, working full time, flat chat each day,
Mhm.
but I've built in times for me to move slower because I'm entering my 30s and it's not going to get faster. My body system's going to slow down. It's going to get
Mhm.
slower from here on out. And it's unsustainable. And I know you're a business mentor. I have another business mentor as well that I work with. And I was sharing this with her. And she just straight up called me on it. She said, "This is unsustainable. This has got to change. You've got to address your time management and you've got to get a team." As soon as I changed my schedule, magic. Booked out until next year, if you don't mind. 4 months in advance, booked out. And I'm like, oh, that is how much I was overworking and over delivering.
Mhm. Mhm.
And people came to expect me as an infinite resource. And I've had multiple conversations with clients, and I'm really blessed to have the kindest, nicest clients in the world because, listen, if you can get through my filter, I'm an Aries, right? If you can get past my horns, then you're a nice person. Yes. So I tend to work with really nice people. But I've had lots of conversations even today with clients where I've had to say politely, I am a finite resource. This is the policy. That's not available. All services are subject to availability. Wish I could, but I can't. Don't hate me. Let's rethink strategy. Let's rethink how you book me. Let's rethink how you study, how you work, you know?
Mhm.
And that was really, really important for me. Then I reached out and got help. So I'm now building a team. 2 years after I really should have begun to build a team, I've been a one man band until this moment
Mhm.
and running a business that is now of my size. I shouldn't be doing it on my own
Mhm.
because it reduces your cognitive capacities and you're not giving the most of yourself. And it's fundamentally disrespectful to yourself, to your clients, and your business. So, building a team, and first team member arrives next month as a groom. I'm outsourcing all of my horse care to someone
Mm.
I would trust with my life and my horses' lives. Um, and that's hard for me because I am giving her the job I wish I had. If I could spend sunrise till sundown fiddling around in my pastures with fences and poking at the earth and doing something with a horse here and starting a trim and then not finishing it and then reorganizing my tack room and then sweeping the yard and then that's my day. If I could do that I would be very, very happy, but I can't. I'm being led by this public that's wanting what I'm having to offer. So building a team, reducing my schedule, and being held accountable and surrounding yourself with people who will call you on your shit. My
Mhm.
partner last week, um, no, on his birthday, so it was 3 weeks ago, I actually asked him because he works in a similar field to me, but we don't talk about business. It's a boundary. I
Mm.
said, I want you to tell me what's wrong with my business. And he said, time management. He
Mhm.
said, you'll go straight from the bed in the morning to your computer in your pajamas and you're working. He said, that is nothing to be proud of. And I went,
Mhm.
oh, he's right. And he's like, I don't say anything, obviously, because he loves me, right? And they'll hold space. Yes. That's what love is. But if
Mm-hmm.
you ask for it, he said, that's nothing to be proud of. That's nothing to be proud
Mm-hmm.
of.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the rigidity that you speak to, that's also my personality. I'm type A, B. I can be both.
Mm-hmm.
So, but when it comes to business, behind the scenes of a business, I'm very type A
Mm-hmm.
because it doesn't come naturally to me
Yeah.
to administrate a business. So, type A is a discipline so that it doesn't go out of control for me.
Yeah.
And rigidity, again, is another thing that served me really well
Absolutely.
sometimes.
Absolutely. I mean, that's why it's there,
Hmm.
and this is why we don't want to just like excise and root out and get rid of. It's like that part of you
Integrate.
is there. Yeah, that part of you is there because it doesn't feel safe in some way, you know? And so
Mm.
then it's about how can we help that part of you that is rigid or the part of you that overworks feel safe so that then you can take over, driving the bus instead of, these younger parts. Typically those parts are related to much younger versions of ourselves who have had to figure out how to survive, who have had to like look up to people, um, and belong to those people, right? And so
Mm.
it's I think that what you're speaking to, even though like our stories may be a little bit different from the folks who are listening, I think that the pieces there that feel really important to just like highlight is that this is like such a common thing with service providers.
Mm.
And I kind of want to do a little bit of like a deep dive into the horse industry in particular, um,
Please.
horse trainers,
Yes.
because since I have bought my property, I have an indoor arena. And so I've been in
Lucky.
chats with, yeah, I feel very, very lucky. And so I've been in chats with a lot of folks who are horse trainers or wanting to make a name for themselves in the horse training industry. And I'm seeing very similar patterns, of being available all the time, of, you know, being really accommodating to people's horses, or people's times. And then even to the point of like putting their own bodies in danger to make sure that they are serving their clients,
Ooh.
which, you know, um, and I think that and I can't quite connect the pieces here. And so I'm hoping that you can help me connect the pieces.
Yeah, let me lead you somewhere. So,
Yeah.
um, I've done a couple of North American clinic tours now. I'm setting up for my third. And my biggest takeaway from my clinic tour this spring was how friggin' exhausted horse people are, or people are in North America. Canada less so. Um, USA particularly so. Everyone's exhausted.
Hmm.
We are living in late stage capitalism, guys, and
Hmm.
it is real. And I don't train for the public anymore. Dip my toe into it, didn't do it for very long. So, if someone's listening and they're a trainer for the public, know the source. I didn't do it for very long, but I dipped my toe into the waters and I went, oh, no, no, hard pass. Thank you so much. I'll serve the industry in a different way. However, I am an equine service provider. So I'm a coach. I produce online courses. I'm a clinician and I teach lessons all online, except when I'm clinicking. And I'm about to do retreats as well. And recently, in spite of myself realizing I'm some sort of leader, whatever that means. Horse trainers, no one's more exhausted than a horse trainer working for the dollar right now. And they put their bodies at risk. There's an element where boundaries are inherently muddied if they're existent at all between the client, the horse, and the service provider, because there's an element around horses where people say, well, it's for the animals, it's for the welfare and the good of the animals. So there's very, very insidious undertones, may I say, often coming from clientele, not from the service providers. Pressure
Mm-hmm.
from clientele that attempts to manipulate a service provider into bringing down their prices, overworking, being endlessly flexible because something, be charitable because it's an animal. I've had these conversations before. I had someone, this was many years ago when I was trimming hooves for the public in southern Spain. Someone locally, this was during COVID, by the way. So, in order for me to travel and trim during COVID, my clients had to fill out a form, sign it, scan it, and return it to me for me to print and carry with me in my car in case I was stopped by the police because it was only essential travel allowed and I was deemed an essential service provider. So, I had organized my route 2 weeks out. And then the morning of my trip, one of my clients, who's a very dear friend of mine now, called me and said, "Oh, so and so in the next village has a horse with an abscess and would like you to just drop by and trim." I'm like, "Well, there's no just dropping by because it's COVID and I've organized this 2 weeks ago. Um, she might be able to get on the schedule today, but she has to call me before 10 o'clock for me to organize that." She didn't call me before 10 o'clock. She called at about midday. Said, "Yes, I have a horse with an abscess." I said, "Well, how long have they had an abscess?" She said, "6 months." I said, "Excuse me?" "The horse has had an abscess for 6 months." I said, "What conditions is he living in?" "He's living in a round pen." I said, it was winter. I said, "Is there mud?" She said, "Yes." I said, "How deep is the mud?" She said, "Well, it's about 15 to 30 centimeters in places." I said, "And does he go anywhere else? Is this his only place to live?" "Yes, this is his only place to live." I said, "Okay, have you spoken to this farrier and this farrier and this farrier who have serviced the local area?" "Yes, I have, but they're too expensive." And I said, "Okay." I said, "Well, here's my price. My price was more expensive than those people." And I said, "Plus, there's a call out fee. Plus, you need to arrange the paperwork because I've already got my route and I can't just put you on today." "Oh, can't you just stop by?" I said, "I can stop by. You have to pay for my travel for me to get there. I can
Mm-hmm.
stop by, but no guarantee that I'm going to trim. I will assess the horse and tell you what I think, what needs to happen." By the way, this horse was a rescue horse from a charity.
Mm-hmm.
He was rehomed to this person through a charity. And I obviously you're hearing all the red flags. They're not, but they're putting pressure on me to come and serve them. "Oh, why won't you just do it for the good of the horse?" I said, "Well, I'm a service provider and I'm paying my taxes." "Wow, what does paying taxes have something to do with it?" I said, "Okay, thank you. Here are my prices. I can come out to you next week for a private whatever." They said, "Oh, you should know something that when people move to this area, they all have to lower their prices because that's how we do it here. And by the way, you should have just come out to see us because you care about the animal." Brazen, brazen, and
Mm-hmm.
inappropriate. So I happened to know the horsemanship manager for the charity that had rehomed this horse to the person. I had them on speed dial, gave them a call, and said, "You need to do a home check on
Mm-hmm.
such and such horse. I'm making an anonymous report." Long story short, they seized this horse back from that person,
Good.
and they sort of guessed that I was responsible, but didn't. Anyway, and they claimed that I didn't care about the horses and I cared about money, but I did care about the horse because I made sure that horse was safe and I did it in the
Mm-hmm.
correct way and I wasn't going to
Mm-hmm.
play their games. Meanwhile, I had friends locally that had been attempting to communicate with this person for 6 weeks about the abscess and going over with painkillers for the horse and trying to describe to them why abscesses are a chronic issue and can't be served overnight, blah, blah, blah. And I can't just come and trim. An abscess is a serious issue that needs rehabilitation and
Yeah.
lifestyle changes, etc. I mean, so this is an anecdotal way to describe what some horse people are up against. And I can imagine that there are horse trainers, trimmers, farriers, body workers out there who will listen to me tell that story and will nod their head and light a cigarette, proverbially, and say, "Yup, got 20 stories like those in my back pocket," you
Right.
know,
Right.
right? And then service providers become jaded. And then you've got a
Mm-hmm.
jaded service provider working with a vulnerable animal. Not a good mix.
Mm-hmm.
Not a
Mm-hmm.
good mix.
Yeah.
Overworked, underpaid, under resourced, exhausted, jaded, resentful service provider working with an animal that needs intelligence, capacity, study, patience, resourcefulness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Not a good combination. And we wonder why horse training is often a brutal and a hostile place.
Right.
So, long way to say, Kate, there is immense pressures on service providers that are not only coming from the service provider, they're coming often from the clientele. And conversations between clientele and service providers has got to change. In my
Yeah.
opinion, there needs to be way more transparency,
Mm-hmm.
way better boundaries, and way more accountability towards clientele who behave in an inappropriate manner towards a service provider,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
And
Okay.
yeah, and I think that this is partially why, I think of you as a leader in this field, because you're putting down boundaries in places where there haven't been boundaries before.
Where there haven't been boundaries. And when you do that, people are often experiencing that boundary for the first time, and that boundary feels, let me give some words, rude, aggressive,
Mm-hmm.
inappropriate, uh, confusing. Enter some sort of bringing my character into question conversation. I always try to be honest and kind. I always try to be honest and kind, but you got to have both.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm
Mm-hmm.
also not trying to be some sort of inoffensive dream boy, right? That's I just can't do that. It's not in my nature. And maybe then I'm not the best person to take this on, but I'm certainly brave enough to take this on. Even recently, I've had conversations with clients where I've had to say, can't answer that question because that question, and this is exactly how I worded it, I can't answer that question. Wish I could, but I can't because the question has invited me into an inappropriate professional interaction with you.
Mm,
You have asked me to give you advice about an animal that I haven't seen. Can't do that and keep my credibility. But what I can do, because I'm not rejecting your question, what I can do is listen to your story, identify the big themes and the pictures and the topics. I can speak to you about those topics. And from that, you might be able to troubleshoot this on your own, which, dot, 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 by the way, would be a far superior service to you to teach you problem solving strategies with your horse rather than remain didactic and prescriptive to you.
yeah.
Harder for you as a client, also harder for me, long term more successful for the horse because I'm teaching you how to fish rather than giving you a fish.
Yeah. Yeah.
I always say if someone asks me what time it is enough times, I will explain to them how to build a clock because I'd like to be free of those sorts of questions. You understand?
Yeah.
And so that was really hard for these clients to hear, but I had built enough trust, I believe, with them within the program we were working so that I could say that to them and they knew which place I was coming from. I wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
take someone fresh off the street and communicate this way because I believe situations call for different personality strengths and
Sure.
situations call for different contextual communication styles. But it's me haphazardly trying to find different modes of conversation and communication with our clients that install and build in boundaries for me and for them
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because it's super toxic field. It's a
Yeah.
super toxic field.
Yeah.
Mm.
I think some of the things that I'm sort of like wanting to play with in this space is um, the balance between burnout and boundaries. That's one
Mm.
road that we can go down.
Mm.
Um, and then there's this idea around, we can use both of our industries, like people needing to be rescued from the problems that their horses are having.
Oh,
Um,
you did not just say that. Are you going to make me plead the fifth? My goodness. No, go for it. Go for it. Take me there. Take me there. I
You know,
surrender.
because
Take me
I
there.
mean, the reason why I'm bringing that up is because this concept of like teaching somebody else, basically empowering them to work through problems and become their own sort of creative geniuses around whatever it is, you know. And I've had so many people come to me, particularly in the beginning of when I started business coaching, who would just be like, just tell me what to do,
Mm-mm.
you know. And I like, for me, that's like an instant like, you're not my people.
Yeah,
uh,
that's an instant no.
yeah.
No, thank
um
you. Mm,
but like, part of that is because like there's a relationship between you and your business. You know, I
mm,
think about my business as being an entirely different entity. I think about my business as having something to say, and
mm,
I get to be sort of the megaphone platform that that energy gets to move through me. And I
mm,
feel that way about your work as well, because you are saying things that are controversial at times. You're saying
mhm,
things that are, you're holding boundaries where there haven't been boundaries before. And so there's this way in which we really need to start empowering people to like reestablish that relationship between, from in my world, between you and your business, and for you in your world, reestablish that relationship between that person and the horse. And you can be there as a little bit of like a translator, and like, this is the experiences that I've seen. But ultimately it comes down to me, it always comes down to the nervous system. I think in both realms is like, when you have a dysregulated nervous system, there's no way you're making decisions in your business in ways that are going to be responsive and expansive and, you know, from a place of abundance. And in the horse world, if you have a dysregulated nervous system, that animal is going to pick up on that energy and res- do its own reactive thing to that energy that is going to be harmful to that relationship between you and the animal. And
mm.
so, how can we move people out of this dynamic of like wanting to be rescued by their service provider? Doesn't matter what industry you're in. How
Okay.
can we move away from
So
that rescuer victim mentality?
I did a lot of research on exactly this recently.
Ooh,
So
fun.
I'm doing a deep dive 12-week group coaching program into emotional systems as prescribed by a specific lens of neuroscience. And the revelations there are shaking the industry, at least the corner of the industry I exist in. That's really truly what's happening at the moment, based on what I'm uncovering here and the connections I've made. But I won't speak to that right now. But what I'll speak to is care and nurturance as the primary emotional system of social connectivity. A lot of clients will look to their service provider as a caregiver. Service provider, caregiver, it's under the same category.
Mm,
It
mhm,
harkens back to relationships with our mothers, with our fathers, with our aunties, our uncles, our brothers, our sisters, and friends. And they see us as a caregiver in some way. One thing I discovered, that there's a connection between panic and care. Panic as an emotional system is about loss. It's about grief, and in a low arousal, it's sadness and depression. It's
mm,
about separation distress, when you are out alone in the cold on your own. And there's very specific evolutionary roots that are about 200 million years old or more that gave us this system that all mammals have. And the primary marker for panic is cries of distress. And the cry of distress, its function is to alert caregivers that the young, vulnerable baby is on their own, and to reunite the vulnerable one with the caregiver. So
mhm,
I'll sit in front of a client sometimes, and the client will be not consciously, and it's not a bad thing. I'm just very aware of what I'm looking at. There'll be there'll be a damsel in distress situation. There will be a cries of help. Oh, it's oh, help me, tell me what to do. And I now recognize that it is a cry of distress. Now, the plot thickens. If the animal, this is whether it's an dog, cat, or human, it's all the same. If the animal has forged strong social attachments with the caregiver, the cry of distress will be met by immediate reunion and the reforging of social bonds and immense protection, love, and care, or the warm glow of oxytocin, which is what we're all seeking at the end of the
Mhm.
day. It's what we all look for.
Mhm.
Is that's all we all want and desire, is to be cared for by each other, especially those we are close to. If the one making the cries of distress has not been modeled positive social attachments in their life, they will not know how to recognize when it is appropriate to make a cry of distress or not. So
Mhm.
they'll
Mhm.
make random cries of distress, random cries of distress in the area, and even direct a cry of distress towards a random and totally inappropriate caregiver, hoping that they will come and reunite and care. When that happens, the cry of distress is not met with care and nurturance, but by frustration and rage by the other animal. Because the other animal says, basically, the body says, that's inappropriate. You don't know me well enough to make a cry of distress with me right now. You don't know me well
Mhm.
enough. You're inviting me into an inappropriate interaction. It's met with rage and frustration. When
Mhm.
I read that research, I needed to go lie down and have a glass of water because I was like, that is exactly what I've been experiencing, particularly because
Mhm.
my specific take on horsemanship is forged in a foundation of care and nurturance. And then
Mm.
you'll often meet people who are struggling with care and nurturance, maybe because something, they don't have good models of it. I'm not saying I've had the best models of it. And it's a really interesting thing. So, how do I help such a person in this situation? Well, first, self awareness is key, especially because I'm not a mental health practitioner. I cannot deliver therapy and I will never do that to people. But what I can do is speak plainly on the truth and try to illuminate some self awareness to the issue. Just some truth. If it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's a duck. Let's call it a duck. Call a thing a thing. Let's just check that we're safe, check that we have trust. Do you trust me? Can I tell you something? Yes. Well, this is what's happening right now. Are you aware that this is what's happening? This is what I can help you with. Boundaries. This is what I can't help you with.
Mhm.
I'd love to help you over here with my primary skill set. That's what I'd love to do. That's what I'm great at. That would be the best use of your money and time with me, is if you allow me, with your consent, to serve you with my primary skill set over here. Can we redirect over here? But that I can't help you with. That
Mhm.
is does not belong to me.
Mhm. Mhm.
You hear what I'm
Yeah.
saying? It's a
Yeah.
ownership thing.
Yeah.
It's an ownership
And
thing.
and I love that you're modeling with the exact language, um, because I think that this is something that I see a lot in my circles is lots of healers, lots of folks who are wanting to help support people, lots of coaches, folks who are in a space where
Mm-hmm.
let's just say they've been validated for being useful in that capacity,
Mm.
right? And so I have a lot of conversations with people about like, you cannot rescue the world,
Mm.
which is another way of saying, like, if you want to put it in like business speak, is like niching. But the very real boundary there is this is what is within your capacity to support. This is what's within your experience to support. This is what is within what you feel excited to support.
Mm.
Um, and it would be unethical of you to step outside those bounds, right? And so I think that a lot of folks get caught in this like martyr victim sort of space because we have
We get a
mutated
hit.
ways. What's
We
that?
get a hit. We get a hit out of it. We get
Absolutely.
something out of it. It's like a drug.
Absolutely.
It's
Yeah.
a drug.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. And so then it becomes less about this is something that we need to fix within your business and more about like what is it that you are getting out of that dynamic, and is that a healthy dynamic, and again bringing in that self-awareness that you're speaking to. And if you're complaining about burnout and yet you're still saying yes to every single thing that comes through your door,
Right.
you
Right.
know, it's not the client's fault necessarily. It is
Mm.
like we've got to tighten up some of the pieces within your own energetic system. Um, this came up recently, actually, um, with one of my clients, and she self identifies as a people pleaser, which a lot of my people do. Um, and she called me and she was like, I'm so sorry. This is so difficult to say, but I really need to cancel our session for tomorrow. And and it was within like a 24-hour time period, and so that's kind of my policy is give me 24 hours. But she was struggling to get these words out of her mouth because she's afraid that I'm going to be disappointed, that I'm going to be mad at her in some way. And she was like, the reality is that I've been saying yes to so many things, clients, friends, what have you, and the one thing that I wake up wanting and craving every single morning is just a day where I don't have to do anything.
Mm.
And she was like, tomorrow I have you and one other person, and I would just like half a day where I don't do anything. And this is where we get to have like these disconfirming experiences with people where I heard that and I heard in her voice like how fucking tired and exhausted she is.
Mm.
And I wanted to give her a good experience of her saying no to something.
Mm.
And so the coaching moment for me there was, fuck it, I want to celebrate you, right? You still honored the bounds of our relationship, which is you gave me 24 hours notice, but you're saying no to something, and you're saying that in a really brave and honest and real way. And so if I get to be one of the first people that you say no to, and it ends up
What an honor.
being, yeah, and it ends up being a positive experience, this is the coaching,
Mhm.
right?
You did your job.
Mm-hmm.
That
By
was your job. That
Yeah.
was your
And
job.
so I basically told her, I was like, okay, so the prescription here is actually to cancel this appointment.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
like,
Love it.
that's the
Yes. Oh my God.
medicine, right?
It's like ultimate postmodern, post-capitalist business culture. Truly, we need a 12-step program for People Pleasers Anonymous. I started my group coaching program with addressing people pleasing. I started my my
Mm,
first group coaching program ever. I started it with them with a discussion around people pleasing, and we all agreed that we're all people pleasers and that we'd all like to stop it. And I started the program in the first week with an integration week. And the first video after introducing the program was community boundaries. And I had 8 boundaries that I outlined in the community, which, oh boy, my nervous system fought me tooth and nail putting that
mm,
tutorial together. It was like they're
mhm,
gonna hate you, they're gonna see you as rude, they're not gonna like you, they're gonna see you as demanding and a diva, they're gonna, all this fantasy rubbish. I'm like, where is this coming from? And I'm
mm.
like, you need to, whatever that voice is, sit down. I got this. Sit down, right? Simple things such as if you have an administration question, which there will be plenty, please send it to an email, not the Facebook group. Because the Facebook group is about discussion, and the discussion can't be clogged with how do I find the video X to video. No, do that on email. Let's keep
Mhm,
the discussion a discussion, right? Use the community. Because last time I did a group coaching program, we had a Facebook group, but then each of the people were writing me their experiences privately on email.
mm,
And I'm
mhm.
like, use the community. That's why it's a group coach. This is not your private program. This is a
Yeah.
program for all of us together. So when you sign up, you agree to contribute to the group. It also unburdens me a little bit and, God forbid, enables me to not be a freaking cult leader, which I vehemently reject and allow other people in the group, clients, to step up as potential leaders, which is exactly what has happened. What happened a couple of weeks ago, which deeply triggering on a group coaching call, 40 people there, and out of a 80 something people group, which is a lot of people for me
Mm-hmm.
as a introverted, deeply introverted kind of loner, I was in the middle of a group coaching call where it was a question and answer section with me, and we had a blackout.
Mm.
Computer went, vroom. I know, it's like, fuck, and then it takes, 10 minutes for everything to come back online. And I've got a great friend called Michelle Knapp. And she wrote me on Instagram. She said, by the way, we've all just continued once you've left. And we're having a fabulous discussion without you. And she's like, don't you worry, everything's fine. She's great. She always knows when I'm flipping, and she just intervenes at the right moment
I
in
love
the
it.
right way. She's a great friend.
Yeah.
And I logged back into the group, and they were like, oh, hi, Lockie. Anyway, and they went back to their discussion. I sat there for like a few minutes going, you guys have got this. I don't need to. I'm like, can I not show up to these anymore? Thanks. That would be great. Can you just do these without me? That'd be fantastic. I can go riding.
Yeah.
And that was so freeing for me because I realized that I was taking up all the space in the room and I didn't have to.
Mm.
And I realized that I was loving my business and my community so much that I was strangling the life out of it. And I just needed to
Mm.
let go. And I needed a blackout for that to happen. So
Mm.
relinquishing the control and actually unwinding that feeling in my just below my solar plexus, somewhere between my solar plexus and my diaphragm, there's this hmm, little ball of goo that gets hard and tight. And I just
Mm-hmm.
have to speak to it and say, stop, step back, let other people step in.
Mm.
But don't overcorrect, because that's my other issue that comes from overworking as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
As soon as you find something, you'll overcorrect. You'll go in the other extreme. People are
Right.
still paying for my mentorship. They're paying for my intellectual property. They're paying for me to figurehead this and to spearhead this and to drive this. That's why they're there.
Mm-hmm.
So even
You
though
can't
there's a group
disappear
discussion,
completely.
right, even though there's a group discussion, I still have to step in and say, yes, dovetailing on this, by the way, and shape it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not to completely shirk responsibility and step back and say, oh, great, I can be lazy now. No, it's
Mm-hmm.
just working smarter rather than harder and allowing others to rise with you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think something that I'm noting, just because I feel like everyone needs to hear this, is that video that you were just, so scared to put out, basically about community guidelines.
Mm,
Um, that honestly, I bet you if you asked your people, it created more safety,
hmm
right? And so
hmm
the thing that we're so scared of is actually the thing that serves our people. I have a very, very similar process with my group program as well. The very first time we meet in group, we go through what are the rituals that keep us safe, what is okay and what's not okay. And it gives people the ability to like expand into that space that you've created for them.
Yep.
And so boundaries in that context, oh my God, create so much safety,
Yep.
right?
Yep. And I think out of 80 something people in that group, there was maybe, I mean, you don't know. It could be selection bias because usually the people who don't like something aren't necessarily going to come straight up and tell you about it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because that takes a lot of courage for someone to
Mm-hmm.
say, you know what? I actually really didn't like that community. It felt icky to me. It felt like you were being demanding and that we're all paid for this program and now we can't reach you or can't access you, but we're paid to access you and we feel entitled to access you, which basically is a long way to say they're not my client.
Mm-hmm.
Because just because you're paid for something does not entitle you to own me at all. I
Mm-hmm.
am free. I am free. I will refund all of you. if I have to. Truly,
Hmm.
truly. If
Hmm.
I've discovered that I have pitched this wrong and you've all shown up here thinking it was something that it's not, I'll refund everybody and I'll keep pushing. I'll move on to the next thing. That hasn't happened. There was only one person who I believe the boundaries didn't sit well with, but they were challenging the boundaries even before the boundaries were set. So
Hmm.
that's who they are in community. They're a boundary challenger. And I have a couple of friends that we were in discussion about boundaries at a clinic. So you can imagine at a emotional horsemanship clinic, the discussions of boundaries come up a lot.
Hmm.
And sometimes these discussions can be good and sometimes they're average. Sometimes they're great and sometimes they're terrible. And one friend of mine in California, she said, I don't like the word boundary. I bristle. It just feels hard. It feels like exclusion. It feels keeping people out, building walls. I want to be open. I want to be expansive. I want to create space. I don't want to eliminate it. And I heard that. I really understood that perspective, but I found that for me, that wasn't true. But at the same time, I don't want to wall myself into a castle. Boundaries keep people in. It doesn't stop people from entering,
Hmm.
but they're always free to go. But the
Hmm.
boundaries let you know what the territory is. It's a bit like fencing my farm. I've got these 2 meter fences. They're not to stop people coming onto my farm or even looking at what I'm doing because I'm pretty overlooked in some places of it. It's to stop my horses from running out across the road inappropriately, killing themselves. It's to stop, errant wild boar or hunting dogs or people, God forbid, coming onto my property to screw with the horses. And locking my gate at night with that key, knowing that my entire perimeter is fully fenced in, 2 meters right down to the earth, that is such a secure feeling. Can I tell you? I sleep good at
Hmm.
night knowing nothing's happening on my land. But they're there, boundaries are there to keep people in and to create freedom within that space.
Yes. Yes. And I think that that's what I mean by the safety and community is it
Yes.
actually is so freeing when a practitioner comes in and says, this is what's okay and this is what's not okay in this space. This is how
Mm,
you can reach me and this is what I'm available for in this space. This is what I'm
mm,
not available for. You
mm,
know, instead of people having to guess or wonder and actually if we're talking about people pleasers, it makes the people pleasers smaller because they're scared that they're going to offend in some way. And so they feel like they can't take up more space.
mm.
And so having the container there, having the boundaries there allows them to like expand into that. Um,
Yes.
so yeah, that's
Yes.
the
This whole discussion on burnout, if I can be really frank, and she discussed it on her own podcast too. Do you know Alexa Linton? Alexa Linton. She
she
lives
lives on Vancouver Island, right?
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. She and I and Elise Mickey, an equine osteopath, did a clinic together in the spring. And Elise is an osteopath, and so is Alexa. And Alexa is also a horsewoman, a advocate, a teacher, a coach, a podcaster. She's my homegirl, love it a bits. And we were doing a clinic, and she had had major health scare last year. She almost died. She's
Mm.
recovered, and she's right back at work. And we're at this clinic, and on the end of day one, she had a full out of body experience where she basically collapsed in the driveway and was couldn't speak, couldn't move, no body
Wow.
control. And I had to drive her home, and we almost took her to the hospital, but she knew what was happening to her. I asked her, "Do you know what's happening to you?" She says, "Yes." I'm like, "Do you want to go to the hospital?" She says, "No." I said, "Okay, what do we do?" She said, "I need to get home, I need to get in bed, and I need to hydrate." She was very dehydrated. She couldn't walk to the bathroom. I had to help her go to the bathroom. I made
Mm.
her soup and sponged her head and checked her temperature every 20 minutes until her body temperature came back up. And then we were sitting in the room late at night, and I called her partner and we organized to get her home. And um, she's a leader. She's 10 years older than me. And she's a businesswoman in the same sphere as I. And we were collaborating. We had a conversation. She talked about it on her podcast. This is where this all burnout conversation started. She said that don't do what I did. I've been burning out since I was a teenager, and
Mm.
my body just found rock bottom. Well, you thought almost dying last year was rock bottom? Nope, this is it. Welcome to your bottom. And she
Mm.
later spoke with her doctors and everything, and she had like some sort of acute burnout episode where her body essentially shut down on her without her
Yeah.
consent.
Yeah.
And I witnessed all of this, and it was like the universe just knocking me upside my head saying, hello, do we need to give you any other signs that you gotta change now and look
Mm-hmm.
at a sustainable business model for yourself that makes a living, breeds security, does good work in the world, challenges the paradigm, shifts the paradigm, but honors you in the process and honors your family too. And it shook me, and I decided to take responsibility for it. Alexa and I had a conversation on her podcast about it with another friend of ours, Elsie, and then Dr. Tracy Rainwaters in the Seattle area. She reached out. She was on the podcast with Alexa discussing burnout as well. She was like, well, I listened to your podcast with Lockie and Elsie. And I'm like, well, by the way, I had a similar thing happen to me too last year. And we
Mm-hmm.
all started coming out of the woodwork. And then you did your podcast. And it was just like, what is going on? How
Mm.
can the young professional workforce be this early in the game and already at rock bottom
Yeah.
and already close to death, working ourselves to death? What are we going to say on our deathbed? I work so hard and I'm proud. No, it's a real, it's a come to Jesus moment for me. And I
Yeah.
wanted to contribute this to the conversation
Yeah.
because I don't know how many people are going to relate with my story, but building a business hand over fist from nothing to something, from nothing to a six-figure business in 4 years
Mm-hmm.
with dumb luck and perseverance. Talent only gets you so far. Adrenaline only gets you so far. Hard work only gets you so far. It's discipline that really takes you the distance. Anyone
Yeah.
who loves their work and is good at it can work themselves to the bone, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone
Mm-hmm.
can. You need no personal discipline at all. I could work myself to the bone every day, all day. It would be the easiest thing in the world for me to do. I'd pay
Yeah.
for it, but it would be easy to do. No
Yeah.
problem. The
Yeah.
hardest thing in the world for me is to have the self discipline to say, could, but I won't. Thank you, but no. No to that. Let me be more intentional. Let me structure. Let me take care of myself. That is so hard. And until we figure out why that's so hard, I'm not sure we're going to see any kind of broad spectrum change. Do you
Mm.
have any insight into
Well,
why that's so hard?
I think it's so hard because to me, it always goes back to the body. Everything about our bodies, my previous career was as an acupuncturist, and I stopped looking at signs and symptoms as something that we need to shut down and rather started looking at signs and symptoms as like communication from the body because the body has no other language.
Hmm.
And so if Alexa was sitting in front of me today, I would be asking her, what were the subtle signs that your body was sharing with you
Hmm.
before it had to scream and
Hmm.
basically shut you down for you to take a rest, you know? And and this is not to blame Alexa or anybody else who's overridden their bodies, but to me it goes back to the systems that we live in. We're trained from an early age.
Hmm.
I think about kids. I'm thinking about a nephew in particular who is so kinesthetic, just like just the most vibrant little creature. And you stick him in a school for like 8 hours a day, and you expect him to like
To
not
sit.
have, yeah, sit and be quiet and do math. Like, that kid wants to be out riding a bike, yelling and screaming about life, and like playing, you know? And so we've systemized ourselves from a very, very young age to override what it is that our bodies want and need so that we find belonging, so that we find validation.
Mm,
And then you stick these little bodies that have been trained in the capitalist system that we live in. And this is another form of how we find validation, is if you work more and if you make more money.
mm,
And so to me, when we are talking about burnout, it's a radical conversation about like resisting the oppressive systems that we all live in.
mm,
You know, it's so healing to my inner child who hated sitting in a classroom but did very well in a classroom, to be like, hey, like today all you have to do is pick up horse shit and like pet horses. Like, you
mhm,
have nothing on your calendar today. That was what I
mm.
did yesterday, is I literally had no calls. I picked up horse poop and I hung out with my colts. Like, that was what was on
Amazing.
the agenda. And my inner child is so happy because that's exactly what all the different parts of me wants to do. You know, my body, my 5-year-old self, my 16-year-old self. And and to me, that is the kind of revolution that I want to start, is like, can we start listening to our bodies? Can we start like actually listening to our desires?
Mm,
You know, and we balance that out with work, because to me, like, I find work to be so fulfilling and so purposeful. I love my job, but that can't be the only thing that takes up the entirety of my life, you know.
mm.
Then you lose the magic of that work.
You said earlier that coming from a second generation American,
Hmm.
and the story of your father losing everything at Chicago O'Hare, and the amount of work. How, and you said that you had this moment of change where you started to present yourself differently than
Hmm.
your upbringing. Am I getting that right? How, how, how? What what was that like for you? I
Mm,
mean, if you don't mind sharing, what was that
yeah.
like for you, for your family? How long did it take? What were the conversation like? I need the 411 on that.
I think that work was probably the least controversial thing that I brought up with my parents.
Oh, okay. So
Um,
you talked about other stuff too, and they were like, "Oh, and that okay. Well, that's not so bad then."
yeah.
Oh, wonderful
Um,
cloaking.
I mean, I don't know if it was cloaking, but it was just, it became unbearable for me to not be myself anymore. Um, I was kind of the model child. Like, I got good grades growing up. I did everything that, you know, a daughter of an immigrant family is expected to do, from the good grades to even playing the violin, and like, name the stereotype, I was it. Um, and it turns out I'm not actually that person.
Mm,
Um, so, just for context, I'm bi,
mm,
and I, at one point for 5 years, I was in a polyamorous relationship with two men.
mm.
Um, and I have a ton of tattoos. I used to
Mm.
play roller derby. And so, like,
Love it.
my parents were just like, who the fuck are you?
This is the American dream? Yes,
Yep.
but it is. But it is.
And part of that was like, hey, like, you moved to America so that I could be
This.
whatever it is that I wanted to be,
Yes.
because none of this would be acceptable in Korea.
Mm.
And so I think work was probably the least of their worries. They were more concerned about the fact that I've slept with women.
Mm,
And and I'm so proud of the work that they've done,
mm,
because I don't think I realized how little they fit in their worlds. So they have moved to America where they don't speak the language, they don't understand the culture. They have now moved back to Korea,
mm,
and as expats they don't fit in. They're Americanized as well, and so Korean people look at them with a little bit of an outsider view as well. And the work that they've had to do had nothing to do with me and had everything to do with them. And this is, I think, where again that self-awareness is so important, is they saw how stifling their own lives were and decided that that's not how they wanted to relate to me as an adult. So all this was happening in my late 20s, I would say. um, and so I think I had the work that I had to do was I had to contend with the fact that my parents might not accept me. They might not accept me as bi, they might not accept me as poly, they might not accept me as having tattoos, all of it. And I still had to choose myself in those moments. And I think that when we're talking about burnout, it's also a conversation about choosing yourself, you know, just in terms of like you've said before so eloquently, is like, just because you hire me does not mean that you own me.
mm.
And learning what those boundaries are. Just because my parents gave birth to me does not mean that they get to dictate who I am. And if they're going to give me the beautiful gift of choice, because another part of this context is that, like, I'm the first woman on my mother's side in that lineage who I get to choose who I want to marry.
Mm,
Even my parents were in arranged marriage. And so, like, if they are giving me that choice, then don't I have a responsibility to actually choose? And so, not in a selfish way, but in a selfish way, like, I want to put like a big S in front of selfish, I will choose myself every time.
wow. Thank you for telling me that. That really helps, actually. If it helps me, it's about bound to help other people.
Mm,
I'm just, yeah, so much grace there. So much grace there. And respect for your parents as well.
mm,
It's been really hard for me to two pieces. It's been really hard for me to not see myself as a product, to disconnect myself from my own internalized extractivism.
mm.
Because in my previous career as a dancer, I
Oh,
was
yeah.
a product. Imagine an actor. Well, this you don't have to imagine. Many actors, they'll sign with a studio and then they have to do the movie whether they like the script or not.
Hmm.
And you're supposed to do it like you like it, be professional and be good at it. And don't roll your eyes about the crappy script. Don't whatever. It's very similar with dancers. Once you're in a
Yeah.
company, you just do what's in front of you, do what you're told. You don't get to pick your parts. You don't get to say, no, I don't like that performance. No, that choreographer's an asshole. I'd rather not. You don't really get that choice. You don't
Yeah.
really get that choice. And you're used, you're a
Hmm.
product. And disconnecting from that has been the primary focus of my life for the last 6, 7 years, to the point where I can't even bring myself to regularly physically exercise because if I do, all of that comes back up to the surface again.
Mm,
You turn yourself back into a product.
mm.
And so that's been really interesting to explore. Funnily enough, when the horse is there, that's gone.
I was gonna ask.
Because when the horse is there, that's not there. That's gone. Because I'm so hypnotized by them that my own focus on myself goes out the window, and I really enjoy that process of losing myself. I
Mm,
really enjoyed that. I enjoyed that when I was a dancer, sort of immersing myself in a character or in movement, and just not being me anymore, but something else. I really
mhm,
enjoy that. Um, the other piece of this is coming home. I've been 15 years overseas, and initially it was like, Lockie might come home. Lockie might come home. He
mm,
might come home eventually. Oh, no, he's moving to that country. Oh, okay. Well, he's got that job. Oh, okay. Oh, he's with horses now. Oh, okay. Oh, he's got pets now. Oh, okay. Oh, oh, now you're buying a farm and you're throwing down roots. There's been
mhm,
this whole wound that's reopened around
mm,
we're losing our son. It's almost like a death. It's like watching my
mhm,
parents grieve for me while I and they are still alive. It's been
mm,
really, really fascinating. But that's sort of what I was contending with this summer. No wonder I wake up in the morning and I feel burnt out, because you need to carve space for these natural human behavioral emotional processes to happen. And if I'm always showing up as a product,
mhm,
I'm just putting all of that on the shelf and waiting for the next pandemic for me to deal with it,
mhm,
right?
mhm, mhm,
Which is what we
mhm.
all did, you know?
Yeah.
It's been fascinating to see how that's affected my tendency to overwork and say yes. I say no a lot more than I used to.
Mhm.
And a little bit like a toddler, when they learn the word no, you wake up in the morning, "Good morning, Lockie, how are you?" "No."
No.
"What would you like for breakfast?" "No." You see? But that's important.
Yeah.
That's important, because it's like you've got a flabby no muscle. You've got to go to the no gym and you've got to lift some no
Yeah.
weights, meaning you've got to
Yeah.
say no to everything. So I've developed the ability to whinge and moan about the weather. I used to be Mr. Stoic, Mr. Positive, Mr. Can Do about any kind of weather you can throw at me.
Mhm,
I
mhm.
decided that if I am so lucky to complain about the weather, that's my little way just to say no, 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 and lift the no weight for a little while in a way that's mundane and harmless. And if my
Mhm.
life is going so well that I can complain about the weather, it's almost like, scrolling Instagram because you can, because you've got 20 minutes and it's just like a way to wind down or get a
Yeah.
dopamine hit. It's a way to say no. And so then it feels easier to set those boundaries and to carve that space out for ourselves as service
Yeah.
providers.
Yeah. I think the one invitation that I would offer for you or for anybody else who's listening, um, is oftentimes because we learn these patterns from our families. Um, and those roots are deep, right? Like when you were 7, there was no not belonging to your family because that would mean literal death for a 7-year-old. And part of learning how to choose myself and contend with burnout has been really getting clear about what's my responsibility and what's not my responsibility.
Hmm.
And so I'm hearing a lot of pain from your parents.
Oh, yeah.
There's a grief that's coming up, and that is real.
Hmm.
There is the death of a story,
Hmm.
there is the death of a fantasy,
Hmm.
and that is a very, very real emotion and a grief. And that is their responsibility to work with. You know, if
Yes.
if I think about it in terms of like horse work, my responsibility is to be the stable center, and the horse can do its reactive thing. And my responsibility is to be like, I love you.
Hmm.
You might be bucking and like be upset with me right now, but I'm just going to stand here quietly loving you.
Hmm.
And that was the hardest thing that I've had to do with my parents because they asked me to get my tattoos removed. They
Wow.
asked me, um, like, why am I hurting them? Like,
Mm.
like, and so my response to them, and for sure they've done a lot of their work, but my response to them was not to cave into those emotions of pain. Like, it's real pain that my parents were experiencing. It was really painful for them to hear that I've been with women,
Mm.
because that was something that was so unaccepted in their
Mm.
culture. And so I had to stand in my own security of knowing that that is my truth, and that it's okay, and that I have no shame around it, and I love you. And so, I mean, I think that that concept around what's my responsibility, what's not my responsibility, is something that doesn't get talked about enough, because we tend to step in and try to fix and over fix things where it's not
Fix and
our,
overfix.
yeah.
Fix and overfix. Fix and overfix. Thank you for sharing so openly. It's really humbling to witness.
Mm,
And it gives so many people permission to examine our unexamined parts and broken pieces and find peace with them, whether we're a business owner or not, right? Because
mhm.
these are not just the purvey of business owners that we're discussing how this shows up in burnout. You don't have to be running a business to be burnt out. You can
Yeah,
be working for the man and be burnt out. I mean, you probably
absolutely.
are, you know?
Yeah.
And whole
Or be a
concepts like,
parent.
or be a parent. Yeah. I love watching these TikTokers that explaining the millennial and Gen X employment experience and like characterizing and spoofing on things like quiet quitting and all of really, really fun. And like finding professional ways to set boundaries. I mean, I find this all really fascinating how we have so divergently stepped aside from our parents' generation and their culture around work and have
Mhm.
adopted a totally new attitude around work. Someone will be in the middle of a conversation at work, goes tick, 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 5 p.m. Thank you so much. I'll see you on Monday. I remember being in a ballet company and seeing that in someone who'd been in the company for 10 years and was over it. And I remember being my first year in the company and we were in the middle of a discussion and this old battle axe was standing there watching them go on and on and on about the same shit, same corrections, whatever. Okay, fine, been here 10 years. I can do this performance in my sleep. And the clock went 6 o'clock and they just turned around and walked out in the middle of the superior's conversation, and I'm there clutching my pearls, the little ballerina in me saying, but the art form, you've got to stay and sacrifice your life. And they're just like turning around, grabbing their handbag, walking out and lighting a cigarette as they go out the door. And that was, at the time, I judged it. I was really judgmental towards them.
Yeah.
I thought that they didn't care anymore. But I realized that they were working in a system that didn't care about them. So why should they care back? They were in a
Yeah.
system that the game was rigged, the table was tilted. It didn't matter how you hit, like in a game of snooker, if the table's tilted, didn't matter how you hit that ball. It was always going to go in one direction.
Mhm. Mhm.
Didn't matter what you do.
Yeah.
And you can hustle and try and hit balls uphill, but you're going to burn out real quick. And the
Yeah.
burnout's designed that way because people are easy to control when they're burned out. People are
Yeah.
easy to subdue when they're burnt out because this world is
Absolutely.
not made for everyone to be living in abundance. This world is not made. They don't
Mhm.
want everyone to have an equal slice of the pie. They don't want everyone to be well rested, well resourced,
Mhm.
time for
Mhm.
learning. We would have a problem
Mhm.
if they would have a problem. The powers that be would have a problem. Late stage capitalism would come crashing down.
Yeah,
And I can't
absolutely.
help but think that the fact that horses are by my side and our side while this is happening is really fascinating because human civilization was built for 10,000 years on the back of the horse,
Mhm. Mhm.
by the power of the horse and the mule and the donkey and the ox and the dog, but the horse,
Yeah.
really. And Between the space of 1910 and 1930, during the invention of Henry Ford's internal combustion engine, all the stables and the farriers and the feed producers and the grooms and the carriages, this entire infrastructure that supported horses in cities collapsed in a 20-year period.
Mm-hmm.
And they've been in this gray zone for a while. And here we are looking at some sort of change, some sort of change.
Mm-hmm.
And the horses are right there by our
Yeah.
side. I think that's kind of prophetic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, they've been in the background a bit in our conversation here, but you can't talk about, at least I can't think about horses because I came into horses really late in life. I didn't grow
Mm.
up with horses, which I know that is similar to you. But I can't think about horses without thinking about the overwork and the overriding of their bodies that we've had to do.
How burnt out the horses are, it's
Yeah,
unreal. It's
it's crazy.
unreal. Like I've
Yeah,
met horses that someone could have literally whipped them till their skin bled. And that
yeah,
horse gave one step forward, and that was all. They said, I am not giving
yeah,
anymore.
yeah.
Anymore.
Hmm.
And the entire industrial training complex around horses still exists this day based on that industrial
Yeah,
complex. It still
absolutely.
exists on that paradigm. And in a best case scenario, I wouldn't have a job. I'd be obsolete in a best case scenario. The way I show up to serve this community in a best case scenario, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. In a best case scenario, I would go to my primary skill set, which is a friggin' riding instructor.
Hmm. Yeah,
How lovely it would be to do that. And
yeah,
yet we have projected onto our beasts of burden the same concepts we project onto ourselves and our service providers, and
yeah,
the parallels in the equestrian industry as it pertains to the greater cultural issues at hand cannot be understated, in my
absolutely.
opinion.
Absolutely. I mean, even just like I've been scrolling through Facebook ads and Facebook forum groups about horses for months before I ever got mine. And the way that some of these sales ads come up around, like, I feel bad that my horse is just out in a pasture, like it needs a job.
Mm.
And I'm like, does that horse really need a job? Like, I feel like it's perfectly happy being a horse. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yes.
And I granted, like, I can't not look at the world through a bit more of a trauma informed nervous system, let's accept you as the unique butterfly that you are sort of lens. But I was talking to my husband, who's not a horse guy at all, and I was telling him, like, I really feel like Forrest, who's one of my colts, there I have two colts that are 6 months old right now. Forrest is so responsive. I've just started doing some like really basic on the ground stuff with him, and he's a dream to work with. Coco, on the other hand, I don't know. I might have to come to you in a couple of years because he's a puzzle and a half,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't understand him.
Mm.
And my husband was like, "Well, what's the worst case scenario if you don't understand him?" And I was like, "He's just going to be a horse. Like, he can just be a pet for all I care. I don't need him to be a riding horse." And I don't think that there's very many people who, think about their animals slash their own bodies in that way. Like, what if we just accepted our bodies for the limitations that they have, you know? And part of what I'm hearing in your story, and this is like an invitation for other folks who are listening to reflect on their own story as well, is like, yeah, we talked about how school forces little kids to do things to their bodies that they don't want to, but like, you in a very, very real way had to override so many of the natural impulses to do your job as a dancer.
Mm.
And so that contributes, like, that then becomes your norm.
Mm-hmm.
And so then because the norm is set at I am uncomfortable and I am forcing my body to do things that don't feel good to me because the company needs me to, or because the dance routine requires me to, then it's not all that out of ordinary for you to then be like, well, I'll just work 12 hours today. That's cool,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. People will say to me all the time, I don't know how you do it. And I look at them like, what are you even talking about? Like, I'm just
Mm,
doing it, And I'm still very close to that tree, still zooming out on this problem. And it's, I dream of a world where service providers are able to show up fully conscious, fully resourced, well rested, period. Everyone from my cashier at McDonald's when I get a McFlurry and a side of fries. I want them well rested, thank you. All the way through to, I don't know, a surgeon, right? I want my taxi
mm,
driver well rested. I want my horse trainer well rested. I want my service providers to be provided for before they try to provide,
mhm,
if that makes sense. And to be honest with you, I am so blessed with the people who have discerned and chosen to work with me. Holy
mhm.
shit. If any of you guys are listening to this, please don't start shame spiraling because I know you're about to say, oh, I don't want to talk. I'm sorry, I bothered looking. No, please don't, because I'm really sort of talking about, in those horror movies when they're being hunted by a killer and then the phone rings and they're talking to the killer on the phone and then the police trace the call and they
Yes.
say the call's coming from inside the house. Yep, this call is coming from inside the house, guys. This is all my shit. This doesn't belong to them. I take full ownership for this stuff.
Yeah.
And I've got a lovely client who'll text me every now and then, and sometimes I'll just say, please send it as an email because I'm having my evening, and when the texts come through, it just and now I'm at work.
Mhm, mhm,
And they just go, okay, and we move on about it, and it's fine. And I have another client who once wrote me 8:30 in the evening, and I responded. She said, "Oh, don't you dare respond to me right now. Don't you dare respond to me in the morning. Thank you so much. I'll leave you be. Thanks very much. You answered my question. Bye." And then sends me a tip.
yeah.
These people are out there,
Mhm,
but there's also a lot of people who aren't well versed in that.
mhm.
And I guess maybe it's about niching as well. Do you have any insight into conversing with people who are somewhere on an entitlement spectrum, somewhere on a extractivism spectrum towards their service providers? I don't even know if I'm
Mm.
using good words for this. Don't yell at me, don't cancel me, don't write me. But do you have any insight about that? Because sometimes I feel alone in that conversation.
Yeah. I feel like your industry is so much different than mine in this because I largely, I mean, I can relate to what you're speaking to, but I largely don't have that problem because of the way that I write my content. And
Mhm.
so there's like a level of it where they don't, like, my stuff is invisible to them because I'm not speaking to victims and shit stirrers. And I look at your stuff and I don't think that that's what you're doing, but I think that because of the industry that you're in, there's a level of people thinking, oh, Lucky does it different way. And I mean, I think I'm referring to a specific post here. I'm, and they start coming after you. I've seen
Mm.
it.
But the people who
And
come after me like that, when I write a controversial post and people come after me, that's just straight up controversial subject matter. That's just
mm,
what's going to happen. They were never a client, they were never business, they were never
okay.
community. They form no context, nothing. And those I can navigate. It's like water off a duck's back. Honestly,
Okay.
at this point, it's
Perfect.
really like I just keep it pushing. It's like wow, and I'll leave their comments up so that their actions speak for themselves. It's just like
Mm-hmm.
you just dug yourself a hole and woe betide me to fill it back up for you. I'm just going to leave that right there like a pile of dog shit on the kitchen table. Well done. Well, do you feel better now? Do you feel better now? You left my shop, and as you did so, you took a shit by my front door as you did so. Do you feel better? Wonderful. I'm glad to have been of service. Love you. Mean it. Have a good life. I'm really
Mm-hmm.
speaking about maybe it's my niching. Every now and then I've worked with people, and this is very, very rare and not even recent. So I don't even know if this is something that is a problem for me anymore. I speak about it because I know it's going to be a problem for others.
Yeah.
And maybe there's someone else here that I can help with this. Someone finds their way into your business, and they're on one hand making all the right noises, making all the right moves, and engaging and buying and integrating and showing up and being business. And
Mm-hmm.
it's all good. And then every now and then there's just a red flag that shows up. They'll expect a reply soon, and there'll be a microaggression if you don't reply quick enough, or a microaggression about your price point, or a microaggression about the way you didn't serve them when they wanted you to. These sorts of things. That has happened to me in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And I try to serve these people and kind of sit with it and go, well, that's a bit jarring, but okay, maybe they're just a different communication style to me. Maybe I'm misinterpreting it. Give them the grace to be
Sure.
themselves in this container. But every time I've done that, it hasn't worked out in my favor in the past because they've often revealed themselves to be a Titanic. They're headed for an iceberg and they've decided to do it on your watch.
Yeah. Yeah. In my experience, that largely went away from me in my business when I stopped seeing people as like one-off clients.
Uh huh.
So all of my people that I work with are in a long-term
Program or
relationship with
nothing.
me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
long term or nothing. Uh-huh.
Yeah. And so, it's an investment both in time and money and also like relational energy to
Mm.
be working with me. And so that respect is there before
Implied
they sign up.
in your business
And
structure.
yeah. And so
Mm.
I no longer see one off clients. Um, if somebody's been with me through either my group program or through one on one work, and they're like, we've graduated, we've finished out that container, and then, 6 months later they have something that comes up, then they can book a one off session with me. But I never take anybody just like straight off of Instagram and say, like, oh, book a one off session with me.
See, I'm available that way, becoming less available. If someone
Partially
wants to
because you're
book
booked
me,
out.
I'm booked out for the next 4 months, right? So
Yeah.
if someone wants to be that person, they've got a long wait for it. So um, that's why I guess it's not happening for me anymore. But I know there are service providers out there who do go service to service to service, and they might have a higher turnover rate. I know some equestrian businesses I used to work for, a client would come into their business one time and never return. And the
Mm-hmm.
turnover was that high, like a trail riding business. It's just like a McDonald's,
Yeah.
And I guess what I discovered is that that's not an appropriate environment for me. I don't have the nervous system for it.
Mm-hmm.
And there are certain
Same.
people who do. Certain people
Yeah.
who've just got a happy go lucky attitude. They're just born sunshine and buttercup. They walk in and they're just endlessly accommodating. And they've got a way that just effortlessly brings people on side, no matter how inappropriate people are. Those people are unicorns, by the way. Very, very rare. Very, very rare. Often in those trail riding environments, the people who are serving the clients there really resent the clientele. That's been my experience. Really, really heavily resent the
Mm.
clientele, and it's strange. Do you think that there's any place in a modern heart-centered, self-honoring business practice for someone who can deliver those one-on-one services with maybe a high turnover and create a space where people can come and just dip a toe in the water,
Mm-hmm.
but that we can serve that person who wants that, who doesn't necessarily want that long-term commitment or investment, but just wants to dip in and dip out and dip in and dip out. Is there a place for that here which can still create safety for everyone? I don't know.
I mean, I am that client. So,
You are
right?
not your client, but you are
Yeah.
that client.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
So, I have practitioners that I reach out to for specific things. Like, I have a creativity coach who I love working with, but I just sort of like dip in and out of her universe as a
Mm,
client. You know, I have a therapist, same thing, dip in and out as needed. Um, to me, though, the relationship is still intact. Like,
mhm.
the work that I have to do as a client in that space is I am still holding that responsibility of like, what am I responsible for and what am I not responsible for? And I'm not asking for that person to step outside of their boundaries to deliver the thing that I think that I'm entitled to.
Mhm. Ha- ugh, what to do if someone, I'm talking about a friend. I'm not asking for advice. This is not about me because this doesn't really happen for me anymore. I'm kind
Yeah.
of retrospectively seeking answers to something I've just always pondered and never quite sat with and found conclusion to. And I know other people deal with it too. They either
Mm-hmm.
deal with it and just don't care and they keep it pushing. That might be
Mm-hmm.
one, but it's impossible for me to not care. What if
Yeah.
that client isn't a cat who is able to respect boundaries and interpret the relationship appropriately, and they just can't, and they'll dip in and out, and every time they dip in, it's just like, fuck, man, and you just got to like pick up the mess when they walk out again. It's like, shit, every time
Mm-hmm.
you walk in here, you come in, you make a mess, you go. Love you,
Yeah.
you're great fun, but holy, it's like, the auntie who comes to town every second week or whatever and makes a mess in your house and then leaves again and thinks they're
Mm-hmm.
entitled to do so, right? What to do with that? How to address that? How to hold space for different kinds of people, but still niche? Am I asking for the impossible?
Well, I think that the medicine for that is your superpower, Lucky, which is honesty.
Mm,
You know, I
just
don't,
being honest with people.
yeah,
Phew.
like it's hard to have that conversation with people. I've had those conversations too,
Mm,
where the conversation is usually like, this doesn't seem like it's a good fit.
mhm,
It seems like what you need is X, Y, and Z, and I'm not able to deliver X, Y, and Z.
mm,
And, luckily I do have a network. Not that I'm like trying to pass off problematic clients to people, but sometimes there's legitimately a better fit for somebody,
right.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, if I have a resource, I don't, I mean, my integrity is I do not pass off problematic people. I will just say, like, have you considered reading this book? Or, checking out
Mm.
these resources on YouTube or checking out this course. But, like, if there is a real issue around fit, then I'm very happy to help them find somebody. But I think it's
Yeah,
honesty. It's,
honesty. What I
mm,
realize is that the reason why I had this issue in the past is
mhm,
because I was still stepping out of that I'm a tool for everyone to use.
mhm,
I was still stepping out of that my job is to be a blank canvas for you to paint on. And then
mm,
I'm worried while I'm covered in someone else's paint and I don't like that color. And it's been a long walk to walk out of that.
yeah,
And I don't think that's the purvey only of professional dancers. There are many people who suffer and have suffered from extractivism in one form or another. Any athlete,
therapists. Everything that you just said
therapists.
here, my clients who are therapists, this is word for word what I've heard from
To
them.
extract something from people.
Yeah.
It's boy oh boy, it's a rich field of subject,
Yeah.
a rich subject field, sorry. And
Yeah.
I think I'm coming to the end of my contribution today.
Yeah. Yeah. Me too. I'm starting to get hungry. But I think the piece that I want to highlight there that you just said that feels significant um, is there a way that we can hold space for everybody? And, or am I asking an impossible task? I can't remember exactly how you said it.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And I don't think you're entitled to hold space to everybody.
Mm,
Like, that's the piece is like, I don't think like space holding goes both ways. You
mm,
have to be receptive to the space holding, and the person has to be skilled in space holding.
mm.
And there is a responsibility on the client's end to, you know, be self aware enough to not project their shit onto you. So,
Wow. There's one moment. It's I'm embroiled in controversy at the moment. You just kind of spoke to that very, very beautifully. Self-imposed controversy because I wrote on a controversial subject because I'm seeking to shift a paradigm forward, and a long-held paradigm that's decades old, and I'm trying to push it forwards. And apparently, I've got the gumption to start that. Space holding has to go both ways. And I think the further we move away from the acceptance of brutality as a norm and as an
mm,
accepted interaction style,
mhm.
the less and less tolerant we will become of brutality. As we become less tolerant of brutality from our clients, from our community, from our colleagues, from ourselves to others, as we become less and less tolerant of brutality, there exists a moment where you need to use a refined form of brutality in a way of setting a boundary, because
Yeah.
boundaries can be brutal for some
Hmm.
people, especially for
Yeah.
people who didn't expect to get them. It can feel real
Absolutely.
hard. And
Yeah.
if we're a people pleaser, we'll back off from putting in a boundary because it feels brutal, and we're trying to disassociate with brutality, so we don't put in the boundary. But there's a
Hmm.
moment where you actually have to refine and make peace with society's urges for everyone to be cutthroat, go get 'em, brutal, step over each other, step on each other to get where you want to get. Capitalism, right? There's a moment where you have to kind of actually fully embody that, make peace with it, and say, no, because I am valuable, I am a resource. No, boundary here, boundary there. That can feel really brutal for people who are not well versed in putting it in initially.
Yeah.
And then it
Yeah.
transmutes into a soft way of setting it. And then it transmutes into a business structure where you never need to set it because the business structure does it for you,
Hmm. Hmm.
which is, I
Hmm.
think, where you're at,
Yeah.
which is probably the best business card you will ever have. Truly
Yeah.
admirable. Kat,
Yeah. I
thank you.
mean, yeah, thank you so much. Just want to share with folks that this feels like honestly an extension of our last conversation.
Yeah.
I'm looking up the episode number right now. It's episode 104, which is
Well,
the
that's what
importance
it's
of
like
client agency.
when you're with friends, and I would
Yeah,
consider you a friend. Doesn't matter where we were years ago. You just pick up where you stepped off from, and you just
exactly.
continue that thread. Yes.
Yeah. But
Am
we
I going
talked
to see
about
you?
client agency and healthy boundaries in
Ah,
episode 104
so this
if people want to look
continues.
that up.
It
Yeah.
transmutes into more boundary
Yes.
talk.
Yes.
Am I going to see you at the Washington Clinic?
You sold out. You have a wait list for that clinic now.
The participants, yes, but the other to order, no.
Oh, okay. Well, yes, you will see me then.
Good. Good.
I wouldn't have been able to participate anyway because I don't have a trailer yet. But
come and watch. There's plenty
yeah,
of the participant tickets will probably not sell out,
okay,
so they'll always be available. But
okay.
the
Well,
participant spots are full. Yeah,
awesome. Well, I will definitely book that, and
lovely.
I'll get to see you this year
Yay, that'll be fun. Thank you so
in
much.
person.
Yay.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you
Okay.
for having this conversation with me, and we'll chat soon.
Okay. Yes.
Alrighty. And I'll put all the links to find Lockie down below. So find the show notes and connect with Lockie because he's awesome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Alrighty.
Beautiful.